Let's talk about comps. Whether you are a buyer or a seller, they are one of the most important and oftentimes confusing and annoying aspects of engaging in the market that is sports cards. So, I'm going to talk you guys through my general process on determining what a comp value of a card is with a couple of different examples. I've got a little visual guide, going back to teacher mode. So, let's get to that. All right, so let's talk about how to comp your cards. First off, in case you don't know, what are comps? Comps are, just the shortened version of comparable sales. So you want to know what a comparable sale is. Basically, that's other items that have sold that are similar to yours. And oftentimes what we like is the exact same thing as yours. Knowing your comp gives you a reference and starting point when determining what you may want to buy or sell a card at. Having comp data is also essential in a negotiation. I really like going in whether I'm going to buy or sell, knowing what cards have comped for, because that you can use as a anchor point, starting point, argument point of what a card is worth and why you are wanting to either buy it for a certain number or sell it for a certain number. I would also emphasize that comps are not the be all end all. Despite what others may say, I recognize that the market is the market, and sometimes that's the case, but there are instances where comps aren't necessarily everything, and I view them as more of that starting point versus the be all end all. So my methodology that I generally use is you're going to want to find the recent sales. So I'll show you guys some sites where you can do that. With this, you're also going to need to confirm the sold price. On eBay, when you are looking up what a card is sold for, and you need to look up what it's sold for, not what it's listed for, because a list is just somebody asking that. I could ask $1 million on a dollar card. That doesn't mean that it's worth $1 million. On eBay, if somebody has best offer enabled, if I come in and I offer $75 on a $100 card, it doesn't tell you necessarily on eBay that that card sold for $75. Sometimes it says $100 and it's just crossed out and it doesn't tell you what it is. And other times it'll say $100 and it won't say anything else, but that card didn't actually sell for $100. I'm a believer in that you also need to omit outlier sales. If I'm going to be selling a card and there are comps at, consistently it sells for between $100 and $120, but there is a single comp at $500, I'm not going to ask $500 on that. That's ridiculous. At the same time, if that same card, let's say instead of that $500 comp, there was a single $30 comp, despite the consistent sales at $100 to $120, if somebody came up to me and said, hey, one recently did $30, I would honestly laugh in their face and just say, no, I can't do that. I'm sorry. Because clearly, if there's an outlier, that's just might be that one certain individual was willing to pay up on a card or somebody sold a card for less than it was worth. So know that there are oftentimes outliers, and I personally just believe that you should omit them. My view is you want to find a reasonable average. Anywhere between the last 3 to 10 sales is my personal range that I work within. You also want to make sure to check active listings, because while a card may have sold consistently at a price, it also may be readily available at a lower price or only available at a significantly higher price. And to the point of rarity matters, depending on how rare the card is, sometimes you might get to, set the price, because I take the perspective of go find another one. If I have a really rare card that I'm trying to sell and there's, the lowest on the market is 2x the most recent comp, I'm going to ask the same price as the lowest on the market. I'm not going to undercut the current market. Put it out there, and if you can find a cheaper one, let's talk. The other thing, and I don't do much vintage, but in vintage cards, eye appeal does matter a lot. You can see a wide variance between, 2 different copies of a PSA 5 simply because of eye appeal. So vintage, it gets a lot more complicated on how to comp cards. I would suggest you go look at somebody who is more in the know about vintage cards personally. So where do you find this sales data? The first place, and the place that I use, is called Card Ladder. Card Ladder is a paid website. You got to be really kind of serious. If you have a premium PSA membership, though, it's $200 a year, and that lets you get into the specials and this and that. But if you have that membership, you can get Card Ladder for free, which is a very nice little perk. eBay is generally the foundation which all of these websites are pulling data from. eBay is the gold standard in terms of determining a card's value. As I said, though, eBay just doesn't always give you all the information that you need, unfortunately. 130 Point is your go-to for free. They will tell you what a card has sold for. The only thing that 130 Point lacks, and honestly the only reason why I think that it's better to use if you are serious about it, Card Ladder or the next one that I'm going to talk about, and to pay for it, is because sometimes 130 Point will list sales that aren't actually real sales. That data is, it shows up on the eBay sold page, but it does not show up on the back end of eBay in their API that, Card Ladder and Market Movers is the other one that you could use, pull the data from. So sometimes a card gets, sells on bids at $1,500, but it doesn't actually get paid for, and then it just gets relisted. So you got to be careful sometimes. So you can see a card listed with a sale when you go to eBay and it's actively readily available right now because it never got paid for. But 130 Point is your fantastic, amazing resource for free. Market Movers is your other option that I would suggest using. Graded comps sometimes are a little tricky because what if you have a slab that doesn't have any comps or it doesn't have any recent comps? PSA is going to obviously have the most frequent sales. They're the biggest dog in the market right now. I use PSA sales to establish a market on the card and then discount depending on the grading company. So if you look at a PSA 10 sale, I use general multipliers. SGC, I think, is roughly 80%. You might hear people say that it's 60 to 70%. I think it's 80%. 9.5, I think that's more like 60% because I would say that generally a PSA 10 right in modern cards, ultra modern, tends to be closer to 2x versus 3x. It's not always a Bible, but generally, if it's 2x, a raw is going to be, 50%. So a 9.5, slight premium, but not much. BGS 9.5 is probably the same as an SGC 10 in terms of the market right now. But a BGS 10 is much harder to get. That does bring a premium at about 120%. On ultra modern cards, anything on a 9 or below equals a raw card, honestly. And if you are looking to sell a card that's with a more niche grading company, not one of the top 2 or 3 companies, I generally, regardless of the grade, the market is going to value it at raw or worse. I don't think that that's how it should be, but that's how it is. So we can get into a whole debate and discussion as to whether or not that's fair. I don't think it is, but the market is the market, and the market's going to market. So a couple examples of just easy cards to comp. Jaden Daniels, Prism Red, White, Blue. It's got a bunch of sales, 6 sales in the last 3 days. There is one clear outlier. You can see there is the $35 sale on August 4th, but everything else is very, very clearly between that $50 and $55 range. The average is $53, very clear. I think the clear value is between $50 and $55. One that sells a little less frequently, but still fairly easy to comp, Aaron Judge, 2025 Bowman Blue Mojo, numbered out of 150. Looking at comps, you've got 5 sales in the last week. There's no real outliers. Like the peak is $32, which is only a couple bucks over the next highest sale, and the low is 20.5, which again is only $5 lower than the next closest sale. So I don't view that as having any outliers. I would say the average is $26.60. I think clear value between $25 and $30. So those are some that are easy to comp. But there are situations where you can't find a comp. Your card has no comps. What do? You will want to find a card of this. There's 2 options. This is the first one. Find a card of the same player. You need to find, an insert, other parallel, different year, etc. So find something that is similar of the same player, determine the value of that similar card, and then adjust the pricing for market differences between sets, inserts, parallels, etc. So if, you find a Topps Chrome card that you're trying to comp and you can't find a comp on that, but you find a Topps Chrome Black comp that's similar, similar numbering, whatever. You then will want to understand and say, okay, what's the difference on other parallels between Topps Chrome and my set? So you look at, an out of 99 versus your out of 25 that you're trying to comp and say, okay, what's the difference on, a Shohei Ohtani out of 99 in Topps Chrome Black versus Topps Chrome. And then, if it's whatever that difference is, apply that to your card that you're trying to compare it to. So your other option is to find a card of a different player, but the same one. So you get the Superfractor. It's the 101. There's no other one to compare it to. Rather than going and finding a Superfractor of your same player from a different set, year, etc., you can go in and say, okay, this year, let's find a Superfractor of another player who sold, and then you're going to compare their markets. Look at some cards that sell more frequently and understand what the multiplier is on those cards. Is your player, 3 times more valuable? Okay, then you're going to multiply the Superfractor comp that you found of the different player by 3x. So, an example here, Shohei Ohtani on the 2025 Topps Chrome Red Wave. This is a card that I pulled myself. So, it's got no sales this year. I'm going to be the first to market with it. Option 1, I wasn't able to find anything this year, but I found a similar card from last year, which is the 2024 Topps Chrome Red Wave. And that one did $22.61 on bids. A PSA 10 did $4,000. Given that it's a low numbered card, the PSA 10 I think tends to hold a little bit less of a premium. My guess is that in today's market, you could probably get $2,500 for a 2024 Ohtani. But 2024 stuff in the Dodgers uniform is doing a little bit more than 2025 stuff, mainly just out of the fact that, first-year Dodgers versus second-year Dodgers, 50-50 season. So I would put the value on this at about $2,000. Go in, you can calculate the difference between 2024 and 2025 by looking at other comps, and then you can get yourself a value. The second option that I gave, we're looking at, so we found a Mookie Betts Red Wave Refractor numbered out of 5. So that one sold on July 30th for $271. So we've got a clear value there for a Red Wave in 2025. Then we found recent comps on 2025 Gold Ohtani. So same players. We got an Ohtani, we have a Mookie. The Mookie did 70 and the Ohtani did 800. So the Ohtani is about 11 times more valuable than the Mookie is from a market perspective. 11x value puts the Red Wave at $29.81. And this goes to the point of comps are an imperfect system, balance, whatever you want to call it. If your card has no comps, there's only so much that you can go off of. Clearly, option 2 in this scenario puts, I think, the value a little high. Option 1, I think, is a little bit better. But this is why I like to go through, honestly, I will try and do both options just to give myself a couple of different potential data points. But it's an imperfect system, it's an imperfect science, but it's at least a starting point for a negotiation or a starting point for a listing price for you to sell it at. Other option, what if your card's comps are really old? How old is too old? It kind of depends on how quickly a market changes. If you're looking at somebody who's pretty well established, a Patrick Mahomes, comp from 6 months ago versus now, it's probably not going to have changed that much. If you're looking at a vet, I collect Alex Rodriguez, his market is not going to have changed in the last year or two. You're just looking at general larger market shifts and changes versus anything other than that. So it depends on the player. You have Bowman prospects who, a week ago may be a too old comp, depending on what has happened with them. So understand how the market has shifted since those recent sales or since that last sale. I would suggest finding a more similar comp that's recent and compare that to sales in the same time period as your card. So the example that we have here is this Jackson Chourio first Bowman Orange Auto. Now, on May 18th, 2024, which was the last sale on this card, it sold for $8,000. That's not exactly helpful, though, because as a young player, rookie year last year, had a lot of ups and downs last season and this season, a lot has changed in his market. So let's find a card that's really similar to this card that sells more frequently. Maybe his first Bowman Refractor. So that one, numbered out of $499, will have a lot more frequent sales. And that one, on July 27th of 2025, sold for $394 on auction. So that's a pretty good data point. Now we want to go back and try and find a comp that we think better captures the market in, around May of 2024. And if you look at a PSA 9, first Bowman, comp here I found is 472.74. So what that means is the value's down about 17%, which I think probably is accurate. And then that therefore would put an estimated value of about $6,600 on that first Bowman Orange Auto. Now, again, imperfect science always is going to be an imperfect science, but I think it's a decent starting point here by just comparing different data points at different points in his market and using that to give yourself at least that starting point. So some closing thoughts here. One, not all sales are recorded. There are tons of sales that happen at card shows. One of the things I talk about all the time on Whatnot is no Whatnot sales are recorded. I sold 25,000 cards on Whatnot last year, and not a single one of those cards is listed as a comp on any website. So when people talk about comps, there's a bunch of inconsistencies, and there's a lot of cards that sell, whether it be at card shows, Whatnot, other websites, etc., that just simply are not recorded into this database. And so know that it's an imperfect system. So that's just one thing. All a card is worth what somebody's willing to pay for it or sell it for. And that kind of goes into that rarity side of things that, if you are the only one with that card in the market, I have a David Ortiz home field advantage. The last three comps are $150, $200, and $300. It's going up. There's none in the market right now. I'm not willing to sell that card for less than $300. I'm not so willing to sell that card for $300. Clearly, it's trending upwards, and I have one, and go find another one. That's the attitude that I take when I'm trying to sell a rare card. And if you're trying to buy a rare card, jump into my kind of last bullet point here to kind of jump around. If you really want the card, sometimes you just got to be able to go for it. Take the shot. Overpay a little bit, especially if it's a rare card. You never know if you're going to see it again. And as I said, comps, end of the day, starting point, not a be-all, end-all. Hopefully this was helpful in terms of helping you figure out the value of your cards and understanding comps and how you can use them. We'll have more educational content like this on this page here, of course, and you obviously check out the Hobby Handbook, where we're going to have a lot of stuff with guests, people like that. Really, really fun new podcast that has launched. So we've got episode 1 live, working on episode 2. It may even be live by the time you're seeing this, not sure. So I appreciate you guys checking out this video. Again, hope it was helpful. We'll catch you in the next one.